Here for Art Club. I'm going to do a quick tutorial today about how to sort of draw realistic eyes. The equipment you're going to need today are just a pencil, a sharpener and a rubber. The kind of mistake that people make when they're drawing eyes is they think it's just either like a ball like that or like an oval like that, and then they put in the rest of the shape. This is usually in the middle, put it like that, and that doesn't kind of look like a realistic eye. So the easiest way I've found of doing it, or the way that kind of I use when I'm starting to draw eyes, is number one, keep the pencil drawing light. So you just practice doing really light lines like this. You can get heavier lines if you want, but basically keep it as light as possible when you first start to draw. Okay, so the way I break it down is, if you think of the eyeball as a sort of big, sort of roundish shape like that. Now, most of the eyeball you don't actually see; it's under the skin, sunk back into the eye socket. So the kind of way that I always start off is to think about it in lines. So once you've got your rough idea of your circle, you start with a line like this, like a short line that goes down at that sort of angle. Then do another line like this, which goes up at a sort of like angle like this. First line's like that, second line's like that, and the third one comes down and it's slightly longer, so it's more that angle. So you're going from that to that to that. Now this at the moment doesn't look like an eyelid, but it will. Okay, so what you've got to remember is you keep it like that. Then once you get your rough idea of your shape, you start working in on it. So the next thing you want to do is get your I don't know what that part's called, the pupil, the iris. So you want to kind of get a rough idea of that. Now, remember that part of that will always be under the eyelid. It's never done like it's fully in show. There's always a bit that's kind of tucked under your eyelid. Okay, so you think about it like that. So that almost comes down to the bottom of where your eye is. Now, the bottom part of the eye is usually not as sharp a line. These ones are quite sharp, quite high. This one's quite a soft line. Okay, so you kind of pull it in like this. This is just a really rough sort of sketch to see what we're doing, right? So once you've got that, you think about where the pupil part of your eye is. It's usually, I've probably done it a little bit low there. It's usually quite higher up in the eye than that. Almost touches the top as well, or it goes into the top, depending on how you draw it. Okay, so once you've got that part, then start putting a more defined line down of what you want to get. Okay, so think about this, and then soften the breaks between that. Okay, so it's not as sharp a line as you had before. So you just soften off the edges of the line so it's a bit more curved. Think about it like that. So it kind of curves around like this. So what you've got here is a tear duct. So there's always a little bit where your eyeball kind of goes like that, and there's like a little rounder bit. What you want to do is soften out these lines a little bit, and then really lightly, more of a curve here, and a longer slope, a longer line there, so it curves a bit more like that. Okay, now the eyelid at the bottom, what you see more of, there's like a lip, so you see the thickness of the eyelid there. So you put a little line just there, just to give it a bit of weight. And at the top, what you get from that is you get a shadow at the top of the eyeball. So when you've got your eye in here, so you colour in the pupil. And then how I usually do it is roughly shade in the eye like this. But what you need to remember is from the top, the eyelid to the heavy lid at the top casts a bit of a shadow, okay? So add a bit of shadow to that. Also in that, but just keep it very light at the moment. So you see there's a bit more of a shadow with that. And then darken that bit again. See how I'm doing it just really, really lightly. So the next thing to remember is what helps define the eye, I find, is when you're putting in eyelashes and things like that, because it doesn't look right without eyelashes. So what I usually do is you can do it any way you like, but the way I find I sort of always start is sort of here, so you end up with a longer sort of curve sort of to the lash. Now remember, it drops down from the eye, so you take it from the point, the top line there, and you curve it a bit. Usually, just to emphasize it, it's a bit longer at the ends, but you don't always kind of notice that, and then just drop it here. What also always gives it a bit of life is when you put a little highlight into the eye. You see that kind of lifts it. So the next thing to try and do is think about how the eyeball sits underneath. So usually, if you take your line like this and think of when you look at your eye, you'll see this sort of crease of your eyelid here. Okay, so there's a bit more of a heavier line there, but just build it up really lightly and just start putting the weight into it. So it's when I say the weight into it, just build it up slowly. Don't go heavy to begin with. You build up the weight by just adding more pencil line to it. You just soften it, keep it quite soft. This, and then think about how the eye is gonna fit. So your nose would be here. Okay. What this is for where your eyebrow sits. So again, think about it in lines. I think there's a kind of line here, kind of line here, a line here, which is off. What you do is you soften that line in. Okay, and what I tend to do is I'll shade in a bit more of this. That's not looking quite right. Back out. Like that. First time. This, and then what I do is turn a pencil at the side like this, so you get a much lighter, flatter shade. Darken that in, put a bit of tone into the whole area, soften it off as you go. Go into the crease here where the eye is, go for a little bit heavier pencil mark. And you've got that line to follow the crease there, so that'll always be a bit darker because that is sort of like bulges out, so there's always a bit, it's always going to be a bit lighter. So whatever you put on there, and add a touch of highlight into it. Okay. Now there's different ways you can also, if you wanted to, you can soften the pencil line like this, it all down, just using your finger, and then putting highlights where you just rub away the pencil line. Okay. So the next thing to try and do is we'll put a bit more tone up here. Well, a bit softer. But what you want to do is think about how your eyebrow sits there. So it's the same sort of technique as I did with the eyelashes, except for you're just more longer, straighter strokes with a slight curve in it, and you just follow that line. Sometimes it will go this way. This. And what I usually do is go the opposite way. And your eyebrow naturally so it becomes less as it comes out like that. So down this area it's usually a lot thicker. So you can do a lot of shorter strokes, but just build up the weight by doing a lot of lines. So we've got this coming in. So that gives it a bit more definition. Like eyebrows are very important. It's something that everybody kind of forgets and doesn't do a good, doesn't always take into how important that an eyebrow is. If you don't have eyebrows, you lose all the expression. You look really weird. It's something that it just helps define the face and gives it life and character. So that's a very important part to try and get right. In a minute, I'll show you a quick way to think about how eyebrows and can change expression and things like that. So now we're building up our eyeball a bit more here. So again, darkening that down, and think about this. So there'll be a shadow under this part of the lid. Darken that, smear overall of lashes. And then what we want to think about is a bit more shade down here, because there's usually a bit of shade down in the face. With the bridge of your nose, you've usually got a bit more of a shadow, so that's how you define that. But lost a bit of darkness here, so some of that shade back in. Under here now. If you've got a mirror when you're trying to draw an eye, have a really good study of your eyes. As you see here, it's not just a flat pattern. Usually how your eye is there's a darker rim around the outside of it. This is usually a bit darker. And then there's kind of quite often there's quite a sort of swirly pattern in your eye. Just build up the shape and the pattern in there. And then again, to give it life, come back in with a rubber. Use this one for this shape. Just think about highlight where that's going to go. So he's given a bit of a highlight down the bottom. Is what you've got to remember is where your light sources are sort of coming from. Usually you've got it coming in from the top here, so it's darker. So all the areas where there's a lip here, so this will be darker. The lip here, so that'll be darker, and it'll be darker under here. And anything else, the opposite, there's a light, so make the opposite end lighter. So you would have a little bit of a highlight there, a little highlight there, but also darkening up here because this is your main shape of your eye. So it's just to give it a bit of weight into the eye, and then darken this, get another bit of shadow down the bottom here, well, at the top. So it casts a bit of shadow into the eyeball as well. Remember and do that. And down in this corner is usually a bit darker too. That there. Now you can also, to make that a bit more realistic as well, is just soften that bit back. So you can see more of the line there, but you think about it, there's a strong highlight sort of coming into this section here. So just soften that bit back as well. Like that. So that's kind of the basics of how I do it. Trying to think other kind of things. Now, one of the other important things is spacing between your eyes and things like that. Just as a basic rule of thumb, you draw on a head, your ball like that. Most people put the eyes up here, which isn't right. Your eyes are roughly the center of your head. When your hair and everything like that comes down, see that? Now, my general way of working it is, if you want to get your space in your eyes right, the eyeball, the space between an eyeball and another eyeball is usually the same width as your eye. So that goes 1, 2, and then your other eye sits there like that. You would draw. That's where your other one would start. Looks a bit wide. I've gone too far with my finger. Yeah, start there. So that's where your next eye would start, and you just use the same shapes. So longer, shorter, shorter again. And that gives you your general spacing. So your eyes are one eye, two eyes. So there's that space, then in between there's the same size space, then the same size space again. And the space between where the edge of your face is usually, I find, is about half the size of your eyeball as well. It's an interesting thing, the way the face and your body kind of breaks down into sort of things that you can measure and use as a rough guide. So as I say, your eyes in the center of your head, your nose is about halfway between your eyes and the bottom of your chin. Your mouth is roughly halfway between that as well. Although this drawing looks a bit odd, but that's roughly the way that works out. Okay. So again, when you're drawing heads and things like that, think about it in terms of lines rather than curves. So if you keep so if you were doing a cheek, you would draw the shape of the squared off shape, and then you can soften those lines back. So anyway, hopefully this was helpful to you, and sort of give you a better idea of how you can draw eyes and add life to them and make them a little bit more realistic. But it just takes a lot of practice. The main thing, if you've got a mirror, just sit and look at your own eye and try and draw it. Try and look at all the different the things that make up your eye, like how far your pupil, your iris sort of comes. I don't think that is the iris. I can't remember what that's called. But how far down it comes when it starts. So instead of you drawing a shape like that with it in the middle, have a look at it and think of it. Oh well, actually, it's a semicircle, so it starts here and probably ends up there. So think about it like that, and think about it when you're drawing just simple shapes, simple lines like these. So it's almost like a wonky hexagon. So just remember, it comes short line, longer slight angle, and longer again, pointing down. The same for that, longer, slight angle, and short line there. So it's almost that shape is what your basic eyeball, your eye shape will be. And then think of it like that, and then just practice, keep it light and softening it back. And then from that, you should be able to draw that, no problem. So if you, hopefully, as I say, hopefully this is informative for you. If you have any questions on that, drop us a line. And obviously follow us on Art Club Dalkeith, I think is the YouTube site, but the link will be down below. Okay, all right, thank you.